Hello, nerds. It's me again. It's a nice 75-degree, partly cloudy day out. It might have rain for the first time in a few weeks. But I'm not here to talk about the weather. If you follow me on Twitter or you're in my Discord, you'll know that Wrel made some statements in the past week or so. He was talking to someone in the general Discord. I believe I'm not part of the general Discord, and I haven't been for a really long time. And someone was, I think, asking in general some questions about shotguns. And the person was complaining about forgiveness and how I'm not exactly sure which shotgun he was talking about in particular, but Rel decided to chime in. And of course, anytime our brilliant lead game designer chimes in on weapon balance or anything related to that kind of stuff, it's always hilariously awful. And I'll link to some images below. It's about 4 statements that got screenshotted and sent to me. He's basically talking about how he agrees with the guy that shotguns feel, all the shotguns minus a few exceptions, which are obviously probably the semi-autos, which still need to be normalized and nerfed, which haven't been yet for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I think this is more about the heavy pumps and the pumps in general. The person complaining about it was talking about how they had, there really wasn't any forgiveness in using the weapon. And Rel pretty much echoed the sentiment that they're not really that versatile, and that he would, rather use an SMG or something if he wanted to be any kind of versatile at all. Or if he wanted any versatility at all, I should say. Well, I saw this, and immediately I'm always taken aback by statements on shotguns from shitty players in the game. Because when I use the weapons in the game, in most games really, because in most games they're extremely poorly balanced, and the games that they are actually balanced in, I think most people find that they're not very good. So a shotgun in an FPS game is really hard to balance, and they get they're harder to balance in games that inherently have longer time to kills. If your automatic weapons in your FPS game are doing 5, 6, 7, 8 shots for an automatic, or for damage for a kill, and then you introduce the shotgun into the game that can either kill in 1 or 2 shots, then it becomes a really hard balancing act to put those in the game and not have them be obscenely overpowered, because in a sense they are supposed to be overpowered within a certain range. But I disagree with that notion in general. I don't think that you just put a weapon in the game that is inherently overpowered at a certain range. I think that's kind of poor. And maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing in a vacuum, but you have to remember that FPS games are not made in a vacuum. There are many other aspects of the game that contribute to whether or not something is overpowered or not. There's a channel that I really like that the content creator has pretty much stopped doing content. It's Marble Duck. He used to do Battlefield videos and is really one of my inspirations for even doing the shit that I do on the channel in a lot of ways. And one of his videos I remember was about spreadsheet game design and spreadsheet balance. Now, on a spreadsheet and on paper, you can have a shotgun that does a 1-hit kill, or a 2-hit kill, something like that. You can have a weapon like that that kills 4, 5, 6 times as fast as an automatic weapon. But a lot of that has to do with the environments that the game is primarily played in. Now, we'll never have the telemetry data that they have, and I don't even know if they collect this telemetry, determining where and how and the frequent occurrence of short-range engagements. But in my several thousand hours of playing the game, and particularly being an infantry-centric player, I've always said that, the game is massively range compressed. And in general, most, if not all of the relevant combat in the game takes place in probably 40 meters and in, maybe even less than that. So when you have weapons, and I think this leads into why you see the metas develop that do, is you see less people running around with shit intentionally designed for quote-unquote long range, which in this game, in PlanetSide in particular, long range is, who knows, 50, 60, 70, 80 meters. Because really, anything outside of that, you really have to dive into things specifically really good at that. And the thing about that is, when you go to use those weapons, say you go to use a weapon that's intentionally designed to be really good at long range, in any decently made game, in any decently balanced game, you do tend to give up some versatility. So when you equip a weapon that is really good at long range, you would not expect to have good even performance in close range. So it strikes me as odd that you would see someone who is developing and designing an FPS game start to talk about, the lack of versatility on a weapon that is specifically intended to be very strong in close range. And close range, in this game, is pretty much defined by the weapon damage fall-off ranges. So for most weapons, it's 10 to 15 meters or so. For shotguns in particular, it used to be 8 meters, and now the most recent nerfs to the heavy pumps at least have them down to 5 meters, which I think is perfectly acceptable, because if you think about it, 8 to 10 meters is not really all that far away to begin with. It's relatively close. So you can still be very effective with these weapons, but like I was going on about the long-range weapons, as soon as you start giving these weapons that are specialty weapons or designed to focus or be very strong in a particular area, as soon as you start giving them extra range, or let's say, for example, in the long-range weapon, its effectiveness at long range, you give it like some really high rate of fire or something, so it's still competitive or very competitive in all the other ranges. Now, where the shotgun differs here is that it does a lot of fucking damage within its max damage range. And of course, it's a pellet weapon. And there is some variance when it comes to that. But it still does a lot of damage. And again, with the thing in the vacuum, like if I'm fighting a group of players and one of them has a shotgun, it does completely change the math of the scenario for me. Because the person with the shotgun, even though he might not be very good, which most people who intentionally choose a shotgun generally tend to be not very good or newer players to the game, they can still output, even if they hit half their pellets, a massive chunk of damage to me that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do with an automatic. So you have a weapon that, you don't have, there's really no, for the pumps, I'm going to talk about the pumps specifically, you don't really have any recoil to control because you're just firing and rechambering. There's no real recoil impulse to control effectively, maybe a little bit. There's really no cone of fire for you to worry about, so you don't have to really worry about controlling spread. And then your reticle is a giant circle on your screen that, the ease of use of the weapon, I think, is really underrated or not talked about by the people who champion them. Because you give someone who's proficient at using shotguns, which shotguns have an extremely, extremely low skill floor. Anyone can pick up a shotgun and go do big chunks of damage or get a cheap one-hit kill on somebody or something like that. Now, when we're talking about the heavy pumps, the nerfs, I guess we have to really talk about Arsenal Update. Now, in Arsenal Update, they removed the small arms resistance from Nanoweave. And in doing so, as was foretold by everyone ever, if you remove that, then you're going to inherently buff shotguns, DMRs, body shot, anything that does a shit ton of body damage for pretty low effort. You're really buffing those weapons. Now, everybody who's anybody could tell you that. So there was some work to be done on the back end of this to normalize these weapons. Now, for whatever reason, it took 8 months for Wrel to normalize heavy pumps. Now, the rest of them, I'm as far as I know, or as far as I remember, the rest of them, like the semi-autos and stuff, have not been normalized. And by normalized, what I'm talking about is Nanoweave was in the game. It gave you 20% resistance to small arms. That fact was taken out of the game, and now you were running around with people that had the heavy pump shotguns, specifically the 11 pellet versions, that were doing 1375 damage at 8 meters. That's 1,375 damage is a lot of fucking damage. Now, that's an overkill on a standard target, and if you are missing any of your shield as a heavy for the most part, you're still going to get fucked up by that. So you had the jackhammer stuff too, and you just had 8 months of shotguns being absolutely cancer. And a lot of people, I think there's two camps here. There's all the good players who are like, wow, this is completely fucking cancer. You need to normalize the values. Please normalize the values to coincide with the removal of the small arms resistance. Well, of course, that took 8 months, and then we got it on the heavy pumps. The jackhammer got nerfed some. But, yeah. So, in their current form, the heavy pumps have been nerfed down to, I believe it's 125. No, it's 100 damage if you land all your pellets. Or it's 100 damage per pellet with 11 pellets on the Gen 2 specifically. And that's still good enough for 1,100 damage. And their max range was further reduced in from 8 to 5 meters, which is still relatively what you would expect from equipping a shotgun and running around. So the reason I'm getting at all this is you still do shotguns are still good. They're still good, but what confuses me about either the person who answered or asked the question of Wrel in the Discord or Wrel giving the answer is that you should in no way expect versatility from a shotgun. You shouldn't equip a shotgun and think that you should have any kind of versatility at all. Because when you equip a shotgun, you're going for cheap and easy kills because that's what the shotgun in this game is and always has been. The only real consideration you have is, can I get within 5 meters of someone, 5 to 10 meters of someone, which is probably the most relevant set of ranges in the game. And these ranges happen all the time. It's why you have metas. You can have close quarters weapons and all that stuff, and it's like Battlefield 4. Why does every fucking body in the universe run the Ace 23 and the AEK all the time, you know? And it's because the ranges that these weapons are really good at are easy, number one, easy to create, because you can move around, there's cover to get around and stuff. And most of the flag points, even if it's a bigger area, you're all still in relevant ranges of those weapons. I don't think this is that hard to understand. So if you have weapons like that are designed for close quarters, and you can recreate those close quarters situations all the time, even on the biggest maps, like take Battlefield 1, for instance. You could run the Model 10 Hunter, which had, I think, 14, 15, or 16 meter potential one-hit kill range, and you could run that shotgun on every single map in the game, no matter how big it was. Why? Because you can force those engagements in those ranges all the time. And a lot of it has to do with map design. And map and base design in PlanetSide 2 has always been very close quarter oriented, which is why you see the metas that you see. So, with that said, with shotguns in particular in this game, I'm not really sure why you would expect a whole bunch of capability or, what was the word? Viability to do other things. You're equipping a very niche weapon that allows you to ignore most of the gunplay requirements of the game and bypass the skill floor of the automatic weapons to be rewarded with big, huge fucking damage in the most relevant ranges in the game. So it seems kind of silly to me that you would expect versatility. Now, if you want versatility, you'll do what every other player with half a brain has done over the last 10 years, is you realize, hey, and this is something I say, it's pretty stupid to run a shotgun in the game, because if you achieve like just this modicum of skill, you no longer need the shotgun to do the damage that you want to do. But the problem is the game is catered towards people who absolutely don't care about getting better. And fortunately for them, there's a tool in the game that allows them to buy into the gunplay by equipping a low ability, low skill weapon. Because quite frankly, it's not difficult at all to get within the weapon's optimum range. It really isn't. Especially in a game where you have a class with a internal combustion engine that makes no sound, and you literally have a jetpack that throws you directly in the optimal range of your shotgun. So, yeah. But to see the lead game designer continue to talk about shotguns in the game as if there's a certain subsection of them that are still that they're bad somehow, you're just clueless, man. Shotguns in PlanetSide 2 have never been bad, and they never will be bad, just based on the nature, their DNA, and the game that they fit in and play in. Now, expecting to have some kind of versatility with that kind of weapon is asinine, okay? Other than that, he goes on to say that, he wishes there were still content creators that differentiated, the capabilities and the versatility and the individual characteristics of all the weapons in the game more thoroughly, like an examination. As though he ever did this on his YouTube channel, really. Besides making weapon videos with some, generic kill streaks in the background and reading stats of the gun off the page to you. The problem here, Wrel, is there's not that much depth in the weapons themselves in your game. The gunplay is fairly deep if you get into it, but the weapons themselves, the categories of weapons, are not that interesting. You have your carbines and ARs, which for the most part I put in the same category. They're super fucking accurate. Super fucking accurate, smaller magazines. Most of them are really good at hip fire. You have your LMGs, which are just really less accurate versions of those two guns with worse hip fire and all that stuff, but with bigger magazines. As for the battle rifles and sniper rifles, whatever. I don't care about that much. Your SMGs are kind of, besides a few standouts, they're kind of meh. The individual classes of weapons in the game are just not really that interesting for what they bring to the table. It's not really that deep, so I don't really think there's a lot to be said there. But I guess he's one of the people that falls into the... it's like talking to someone who thinks that Arsenal Update was really huge for the game and a really great step forward when it comes to... Again, we hear this shit about versatility in my weapon. I can put all these different attachments on my Car S, and I mentioned something a while ago. It's like, no matter what attachments you can put on a lot of these guns, man, if it doesn't change the hard DNA of the weapon, as in the most important aspects of the weapon in the game are notably its rate of fire and its damage model. Somewhat outside of that is if it has egregious first shot multiplier or something like that, or really, really bad moving spread, but those are all things you can play around. And when you become even slightly better at the game or skilled at the game, the main factors you're looking for are what's the rate of fire and what's the damage model and maybe what's it fall off to? So, or what range does it start falling off? So all this other shit, I'm getting to the point now where Arsenal Update, I think, is a complete and total failure. It brought people to the game because people are interested in infantry stuff, and you see that more than anything else, but did it really change metas? Really? At all? With the attachments that were brought? I mean, you had the heavy barrel, which is still bugged and reducing your speed by too much, more than advertised, which is, it doesn't even say how much. And it's mostly put on weapons that were already really super accurate anyway and didn't really need the heavy barrel. You have angled grip on a bunch of stuff, but first shot multiplier in this game is kind of trivial. I mean, I see people running around with some like ARs and shit with with the angled foregrip. It's like, what? Ultimately, what it becomes is like just a bunch of noob traps for people. You have the kneecap ammo and all this shit. I mean, you have more options to do stuff, but is the gun really that different, really? And in my experience, and someone who cares about, you know, what we're doing with the weapons in the game, all the meta guns are still the same. And it's because of what I talked about earlier. And the meta guns will always be the meta guns in the game, unless the game somehow magically expands in one patch the play space of all the bases to make the 30 meters and in stuff just not as good. So I don't know. I thought about doing an entire... I haven't done a shotgun video since 2018. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, should I just do a new video on shotguns? And the more I thought about it, I'm like, why would I fucking bother? Like, the guy running the game and responsible for balancing the game still thinks that shotguns feel bad for some reason. And I can say that the only people that think shotguns feel bad are shitty players and people who have bad accuracy, like with pump shotguns. If you have like 50% or lower general accuracy on pump shotguns, you're fucking terrible. That's bad. That's really bad. You should probably be 70-80%, really, realistically, because you're just putting a big circle on someone's body, and it's really trivial to get in the ranges. If someone, to me, with 50%, like 60, 50, 40, someone with that kind of accuracy on pump shotguns has a real hard time putting a giant circle on someone, on the biggest part of someone's hitbox, which is an immediate red flag. So most of the people I see complaining about shotguns not being good, 99.99% of the time, that person, you can disregard everything else they say, because they literally can't even put their reticle on a guy in an FPS game. So yeah, maybe Wrel is one of those guys. I don't know. I haven't stat checked him in a while. I know he's playing, but yeah, you shouldn't expect versatility from a specialized weapon like that. And yeah, there's no, what's ultimately going to come of this is, he mentioned in the patch note about a heavy swing to the pumps that they might need to get buffed back up in the future. Fucking no. Don't, there's no reason to ever buff shotguns in this game ever. And last year, you buffed them like 4 times. And then normalized a handful of them back down to what they should be. Post 20% reduction to small arms removal. All the rest of the shotguns still need normalization. All the battle rifles, the fucking body shot sniper, all that shit still needs to be normalized. They all need to lose 20% damage off the top end. That still needs to happen. And we're well over a year now after this, and it still hasn't happened. And this moron is now talking again about how they feel bad. This game is hopeless. And as long as this guy is in charge of the game and balancing the shit, it will always be hopeless. That's it for me. I'll see you later. So it strikes me as odd that you would see